Good afternoon and welcome today to the ALS Canada webinar. We're pleased to be able to have you here during June ALS Awareness Month and just as we're about to lead into International ALS Awareness Day. I'm Tammy Moore and I'm the CEO of the ALS Society of Canada, and I'm so pleased to be able to have so many of our team members that are joining us today to be able to share some insights into the work that we do at ALS Canada, to answer some of your questions, and to be able to really give you what you're looking for in terms of information. To begin with, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. At ALS Canada, we continue our learning on the work of addressing inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility, or as we like to call it, IDEA. I want to begin by acknowledging that despite the virtual nature of this event, we're each joining today from Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we thank all the generations of people who for thousands of years have taken care of the land we each live on. Long before today, as we each join from our respective homes and workplaces, there have been Indigenous peoples who have been the stewards of this land. Today, I'm joining you from Toronto at the office of ALS Canada. This is the traditional territory of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. And we also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples who have made in shaping and strengthening the country. The map on this slide is taken from Native Land Digital. I encourage you to explore this resource and learn more about the history of the lands that we each inhabit, the people who inhabited it and stewarded those lands, and how to actively be a better part of a better future going forward together and implement the truth and reconciliation in each of our communities. We've put a link into the chat for your reference. On our journey of truth and reconciliation, we constantly consider how we can be more inclusive in the work that we do, in the investments that we make in research, the contributions of Indigenous people within that research, and the opportunities to address the inequities within the access to healthcare, resources, and therapies for First Nations, Indigenous, and other people facing adversity. So please join with us in your own interpretation of IDEA. So as we start and kick off our webinar today, we are joined by Andrew Dundas, who's a community ambassador. Andrew's been an active participant in the community. He has been a part of the Canadian ALS Learning Institute, CALI. He's been involved in the National Research Forum, and he's even been a part of our community advisory group. So Andrew, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Tammy, and good day, everyone. You have ALS and symptoms of Parkinsonism. You have 2 to 5 years to live with progressive decline for death. That was my first introduction into ALS. I didn't know what it was about, but after hearing those words, I couldn't hear anything else that was being said. Over the next 4 months, I went through a series of tests before my diagnosis was confirmed in December of 2022. And it was at that point that somebody referred me at the ALS clinic at Sunnybrook, had referred me to ALS Canada for support. And that was literally a life-changing moment on my journey with this disease. I learned about ALS. I learned about the lack of funding, that although there's no cure for this disease, it is not uncurable. And I made the decision at that point to do whatever I could to help raise awareness, advocate, and in my own personal way, do fundraising for this, for ALS Canada, and in the search for a cure. I started a virtual ride across Canada. Ambitious, but I thought, why not go big? And to the date, I've gotten about halfway across Canada, and had to stop due to my progression. But ALS Canada has been supportive in many other ways, not only in allowing me to understand the research that is underway, but also the equipment loan program that has provided me with a walker and a wheelchair, and more importantly, the support groups. These have been life-changing. They've introduced me to a community where I otherwise would have felt alone. And for all of these, even though I raise awareness, give talks, I can't thank ALS Canada enough for the support that they've allowed me to be able to manage this disease, not on my own, but with others. With that said, I will pass it back to Tammy, and I hope everybody enjoys today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I know we connected very first as you were starting your cycle across Canada. So we really appreciate all that you do to be able to raise awareness and to be able to help others so that they don't feel like they're alone on this journey, because we know how very isolating that it can be. So thank you. So the first slide that we're going to actually share with you is the ALS Canada Strategic Plan. This plan came about and was approved by our board in 2024, but in fact it was started over a year and a half before that. And when we're developing a strategic plan at ALS Canada, we don't do it by going into our own room and just coming out with something. We engage stakeholders from across the ALS ecosystem to be able to help inform the plan and make sure it's tried and tested as we go forward. So in fact, it started with having over 70 people that were together in a room, as well as many more people that supported virtually from all different facets of the ALS community. We had researchers, clinicians, we had people from other disease states that helped to inform it. And most importantly, we had people who were actively living with ALS who made sure that what we were talking about was resonating with what they were looking for. There were 4 key areas that were identified, and you're going to hear a lot more about them today, whether it's research or whether it's driving equitable access to resources, when it's within healthcare, when it's with therapies. We also are looking at how we can mobilize for collective action when we think about advocacy. And then when we talk about empowering and making sure that people have the tools and resources and information so that they can make informed decisions. It's not just the person that's living with ALS, but it's also broader than that, because we're thinking about decision makers, for instance, who need better access to information and resources as they're making decisions that have an implication for people affected by ALS. So what you see here on under the strategic impact goals are each of the areas. And then you can see some aspect of the objectives. And then, of course, we always want to think about, but what's the impact? What are the outputs and outcomes and impact that we're looking to have? And this is just a start of some of those. You're welcome to check out our website at als.ca. And in our About section, we've got great information on our strat plan, as well as previous annual reports that show you how you can see that measurement and the progression that we're taking towards achieving this. So though last year was our first year with the strat plan, we're now well into our second year, and we still have 3 more to go. And I'm pleased to see how much progress has been made during that time. But you're not going to hear about from me. I'd love to turn it over to our team. And so first up, we have Dr. David Taylor, who's our Chief Scientific Officer for ALS Canada, to begin to talk about research before he hands it off to the rest of his team. Dave?
Thanks, Tammy. It's such a pleasure to be able to speak to you very briefly today with a teaser trailer about what our team does at ALS Canada. You can see that first strategic piece there around leading Canada's contribution to global ALS research. Obviously, this involves investments. You're going to hear briefly about that from my colleague Colleen, as well as we try to be global knowledge leaders. We try to facilitate things across the whole ecosystem. And so we're just going to give you a little snapshot of that. If there's anything in here you want to know more about, please absolutely do reach out. We're super passionate about all of them. Please click. So yeah, you've just seen that little portion of the strategic plan, but our team really does work cross-functionally across the organization. Please click and you can just see that there are many different things that we are involved in. So you're going to get a little taste of some of those today. And it's really a pleasure to be able to do that. So please click. This is our team of three. We work really hard together, but as you can see, we sort of think of it as a triangle where we've got Carolina Young, who isn't here with us today, who's our manager of research, engagement, and impact, really working on advancing communications and informed decision-making alongside the team you're going to hear about a little bit later. We've got my great colleague you're going to hear from in about 1 or 2 seconds, Colleen Doyle, who's the director of Canadian research and also manages the clinical network, CALS, across the country, and then myself working on global research and strategy. We do all work as a team, intertwined with our things, and have really tried to advance things on many of these different avenues. And I'm going to move it right over to Colleen for a little bit on some of the funding initiatives.
Thank you. As Dave mentioned, I'm Colleen Doyle, Director of Canadian Research, and I'm excited to share a bit about the ALS Canada Research Program with you today. One of the more well-known aspects of what we do is our National Research Granting Program. Through our programs, we aim to support the entire research ecosystem. So we fund the most promising ALS research projects across Canada through our discovery grants. We also invest in people through awards that help to train and retain ALS research talent in Canada. The Clinical Research Fellowship, for example, supports the advanced training of clinicians in both clinical care and research skills specific to ALS. The Career Transition Award helps promising early career researchers establish themselves as independent scientists. And finally, Trainee Awards provide salary support to PhD candidates and postdoctoral fellows who are focused on ALS research. And together, these programs help to drive scientific progress while also building the future of ALS research and care in Canada. Next slide, please. So we use a comprehensive peer review process to determine which projects receive funding, which I've outlined here at a high level. This process is considered an international gold standard and involves a panel of independent researchers who evaluate and rank each application based on their scientific merit and potential for impact. It is a rigorous process, but a vital one to ensure that we are funding the best possible research projects and also maximizing the impact of donor dollars. Next slide. So in addition to the granting program, there are many other ways that we provide support to the Canadian ALS research community. Probably one of the most important avenues is the ALS Canada Research Forum. Each year we bring together the entire Canadian ALS research community for a 3-day event. It serves as a platform for researchers to share ideas, form new collaborations, and connect with people affected by ALS. Next slide. We also promote collaboration through travel awards and meeting sponsorships. Each year, for example, we provide travel awards to help Canadian ALS researchers share their work at major international meetings. We also set aside a small amount of funding to sponsor additional ALS meetings, provided they include meaningful Canadian content. Next slide. We also have a very strong partnerships with the ALS clinics and treating physicians across the country through the Canadian ALS Research Network, or CALS. Since 2017, ALS Canada has been providing administrative support to the CALS network. Next slide. Since ALS Canada began providing this support, we've seen a number of advancements, including more formalized communications through regular calls and monthly research reports. Membership has more than doubled in the last 5 years. We've implemented a new executive structure, built closer relationships with other organizations like the CNDR, and made CALS information publicly available on our website. Increased industry outreach has improved both patient and clinic participation in clinical research, and CALS members have led several key initiatives that have helped to advance both ALS research and care across the country. Next slide. So building upon the success of CALS, we've launched a new Canadian engagement strategy for fundamental ALS researchers. We recently started hosting bi-monthly community sessions where Canadian ALS researchers can come together virtually on a regular basis to discuss the latest advances in the fields. We also launched a new monthly newsletter to keep researchers informed about upcoming webinars, different funding opportunities, key meetings and deadlines, and other important information. We're exploring more formalized mentorship opportunities to support the next generation of ALS researchers, and ultimately we aim to enhance connectivity across the research community. Next slide. ALS Canada also makes a number of strategic investments with national and international significance, but in the interest of time, I'll highlight just a few of them here. So for example, we were very early supporters of Capture ALS. This is an open science patient-centered platform designed to help researchers better understand the clinical heterogeneity of ALS by constructing one of the most comprehensive biological pictures to date. Researchers are hopeful that by doing so, they may be able to massively accelerate therapeutic development and make personalized treatments possible. Next slide. We also support global initiatives such as Project Mine. The goal of Project Mine is to map the full DNA profiles of 15,000 people living with ALS and 7,500 healthy controls in order to identify genes associated with the disease. As part of this global effort, Canada has committed to contributing 1,000 DNA profiles. So far, we've submitted over 800 of those sequences, and globally, the project is 50% complete. Next slide. And the last piece I will touch on before turning it back over to Dave is that thanks to a generous donation from TD Bank Group, we've hired Canada's first national genetic counselor dedicated to ALS. This new role will support individuals navigating genetic counseling and testing in Canada, as well as help to develop important educational resources. And this is an important step forward because it promotes access to vital genetic counseling for all Canadians, regardless of where they live. So back to you, Dave.
And so, as we've also alluded to, we are very adamant that we want to get as much information out, and obviously in conjunction with our colleagues that you'll hear from in just a few moments. So one of the things is around genetics, and we know that there are a lot of questions around this. So one resource that has been built in recent years is the ALS Canada Gene Hub, which is really an ability to be able to go on at any level and to be able to learn about where genetics affects any person living with ALS. Please click. Our colleague Carolina has also provided a resource for talking to youth about ALS and genetics in partnership with Global Neuro Y Care, in hopes that this will become a global resource that might be translated to other languages. We have also worked in conjunction with industry and the clinical network CALS to be able to develop an early diagnosis tool. Please click. We have clinical trial information and FAQs, as well as a lot of information on our website and webinars that you'll also hear about in a few more minutes that we're working on for clinical trials. Please click. And Carolina's been working on a lot of different ways to be able to get research out to everyone, because we do a lot of things we haven't always talked about it. So we're really excited about some of these different avenues, and please do look for them online, including our ALS Research and Clinical Trials 101, an opportunity to join us once a month to be able to ask any questions you have and help us to navigate you through the research landscape. Please click. And so we've worked really hard as an organization to become one of the most connected ALS organizations anywhere in the world. We feel like we are pretty well connected to any organization, any researcher, clinician, anywhere in the world. Not only be able to bring great research back to Canada, to connect Canadian researchers out to the world, but also to be global knowledge leaders and be able to really discuss and talk about anything that's happening anywhere in the world. Please click. And we're also working very hard as an organization to get out there and to try to leverage your dollars by having influence. So not only do we provide a research program, as Colleen talked about, we're also working around the world in collaboration with others to be able to drive where ALS researcher dollars are going. And there's a lot here. I won't get into any of them. If you have a question about any of them, please do ask, but please click. And you'll see that we are actually influencing more than $150 million of ALS research, which means that your funds, please click, are actually leveraged more than 50 times to influence global ALS research. So not only are we providing a really rigorous program to fund Canadian ALS research, we're also influencing where global dollars are going. Please click. And one of the last things I want to talk about, people often ask what's going on in the research world. ALS Canada is really proud to be co-leading possibly the largest engaged, widest engaged research initiative of all time. Over 600 researchers, close to 60 countries engaged, really looking for fundable, high impact actions that will fill gaps and accelerate ALS-MD research globally. And we're really hopeful that this will be an opportunity for ALS Canada to support the most impactful research anywhere in the world in combination with the work we do here in Canada. And that is it from our team. And we're going to pass it off, I believe, to my colleague, the VP of Community Services, Kim Barry.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to follow up after Colleen and Dave in their whirlwind of the research program. Just a reminder, I did put in the chat that we are very happy to take your questions. So please feel free to put them in the chat if you haven't done so yet. So as you can see, based on our strat plan, driving equitable access to care is important in the community services aspect. So we're going to break down a little bit about what we do in community services. We can go to the next slide. So what we've done is we've actually broken it down into 3 areas, one being Ontario specific. So very grateful for the fact that we have community leads who are helping people navigate the healthcare system wherever they live in Ontario. So we have 9 community leads that are available to help people with information and resources, ensuring they have access to the supports they need wherever they live in Ontario. We also have 2 clinics specifically that we have an opportunity to work directly in. So from the time of diagnosis, we actually have someone from our team in that clinic to help navigate. As you can imagine, coming into an ALS diagnosis can be extremely overwhelming. So the opportunity to ask questions right off the bat and get connected with an individual is critical to building those relationships. And our equipment program. So our equipment program is a big part of what happens in Ontario. Last year, we provided 3,400 pieces of equipment to just over 1,000 people in our program. ALS Canada was able to support over 1,400 individuals living with ALS. That being said, it's really important to recognize that it is more than the individual that we support. So we actually take that number and times it by 7. So in Ontario specifically, we're supporting about 10,000 individuals and their families, their healthcare providers, their friends, their community members, people who have individual questions about ALS, and making sure that they have the resources to help them navigate what's important for their journey with ALS. As Andrew so kindly pointed out at the beginning, is our support groups. Support groups is a way for people to feel connected, to be engaged, to reduce isolation. And pre-COVID, we had support groups actually in person, and we've moved to virtual. And it's been extremely successful for us because no matter where you are, you're able to attend a group based on the schedule that's important to you. You don't have to leave your home, that you can be, have a family member who is in another country who is trying to provide support for you and getting information. They're able to attend if they live in Mexico or they live in Australia. So we've had some really big successes for families being able to be engaged. And we have support groups based on what an individual needs. So we have groups for individuals who are living with ALS. We have groups specifically for caregivers as well. I know we're going to talk a lot in this webinar about our webinars and workshops coming up, but I did want to highlight that we take the information from our community about what's important to them and how we can educate our community on their individual needs. So based on our surveys and our feedback, we take that information to build our next year's roster of webinars and making sure that people are getting the information that's really relevant to them in the time. And we're having conversations about very difficult things sometimes. So, webinars is a way that an individual can get the information without having to ask specific questions. And in 2024, we were able to do many workshops for caregivers so that would reduce isolation and have really strong ability to connect with other individuals who are dealing with caregiving. Information and resources. This is a broad one as well, but I wanted to bring up the fact that a big part of what happens in community services is education. So we provide a lot of education to individual organizations like hospices, long-term care homes, hospitals, Ontario Health at Home, anyone who's really willing to engage with us around progression of the disease, basic information about the disease, what supports individual needs. We are going into those places and providing those education for anywhere from 3 or 4 individuals who are providing support to hundreds of individuals in a long-term care home when there is a new resident living with ALS admitted to that facility. Our community leads are also providing bereavement support. So when someone has lost their person to ALS, we're going out and doing support there, and also having a bereavement program. So for us, we have twice a year, we typically have sessions where we can engage the families who have lost someone in a bereavement structured program. So that allows them to work through grief and loss with other individuals who are going through the same thing. On our advocacy side, which I know we're going to next, but there's a big part of what happens in community services, collaborating with the Ontario Health at Home program. So ensuring that people have specialized support, that they have access to PSW care, and providing information about ALS in general so that people can understand progression and meet people where they're at. This year, we're really thankful that we're starting our mental health program for caregivers. We're actually going to be able to provide therapy sessions for caregivers in Ontario specifically through a generous donation of a foundation. And then I put a picture on here because I think it's important. This doesn't happen without people. Coming into June, it's, we're halfway through, and the Walk to End ALS is a big part of what happens in our organization. So there's a lovely picture of many team members because everybody comes together to support every part of this organization. So we thought we'd share that little photo with you. So then nationally, we're really excited because we actually have a national community lead. Her name is Emily Moffat, and she is helping people access information in a new way within our organization. This means that no matter where you live in Canada, you have access to the same information and the same resources. What we're trying to do ultimately is ensure that you have the same level of support wherever you live, but really Emily's helping people navigate that system wherever they are and providing information to, allied health professionals. If you are in a rural community and they don't have any information about ALS, providing them with some of those materials and support is crucial to making sure that people can make informed decisions. The other part of this is we are working through right now a national survey to ensure that no matter where you are, we know where those gaps are in the system, and we can help, hopefully, plug some of those gaps, making sure that we are aware of what they are so individuals can get the care they need no matter where they are in Canada. So we're actually working with individuals who are living with ALS across the country to make sure that they are helping inform the decisions we make around getting that information. So whether it is a hospice program, whether you have access to ventilation support, we're really just trying to look across the board at all the providers to make sure that you have no problem making sure that you can access that information. And a big project we're working on this year, and I think we're really lucky that Colleen and Dave had highlighted the National Genetic Counselor, is that we're looking at what are the specific areas of support for people who are genetically at risk of ALS. And this is a very big community and a very big unknown for us. So we're stepping into this space, working with those individuals to identify where the need is so that we can help support those individuals, making sure that people have the information, like Dave had mentioned, in the Gene Hub, but it's also making sure that how do you get genetic testing? Where can you get genetic testing? So we're working on some of those resources. And then nationally, we also work with all the other provincial societies to come together to have conversations regularly around where those gaps are in the system and how we can support each other. We're going to go to the next one. And before I wrap up, we're going to talk a little bit about our international work. And that is really about making sure that we're level setting across the board. We're sharing our resources and our knowledge with other organizations who may not have the same level of capacity that we do. And we're taking those ideas that they're providing us with and implementing some of those programs. So a lot of it is sharing resources so that people don't have to duplicate some services. We've spent a lot of time in the last few years speaking about medical assistance in dying to organizations that really have not had the same level of engagement from their community around what medical assistance in dying needs and what that means to those individuals. We've also really had an opportunity to work with organizations like MND Scotland and the ALS Association in the US to provide some information and materials around how we run our support groups and what makes us successful, and learning from those opportunities. And then we're really lucky also that we had an opportunity that we are presenting that information nationally to other organizations who are also providing support to people living with ALS. So this was an opportunity for us to brag a little bit about our team and all the work we do, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity today, and I'm happy to take any questions. I'm going to pass over to Elida now.
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. My name is Lyda Elkenelp. I'm the Senior Manager of Advocacy and Stakeholder Relations at ALS Canada. Advocacy is an area of significant focus within our organization. And within our strategic plan, advocacy is specifically called out under the strategic impact goal of mobilizing collective action to advocate for maximum impact. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about our approach to advocacy and our recent progress and priorities. So at ALS Canada, first and foremost, our advocacy is grounded in the experiences of our community. Every day, we see firsthand the tremendous impact of an ALS diagnosis, both physically, mentally, and financially. And we know that the realities of the disease are harsh, which then reinforces the important role that government decision makers play in changing that reality. So to achieve that, we work with the ALS community to inform our advocacy priorities, and bring forward the issues they have identified, their stories, and the urgency they're facing to government officials and decision makers. And engaging with government officials and decision makers is a very crucial part of advancing our mission, and we focus on building relationships at various levels of government, including federal, pan-Canadian, and provincially in Ontario. And ultimately, by taking this approach and advocating for the ALS community, we push for policy changes that will have a significant and lasting impact on the lives of people affected by ALS, both now and in the future. So as I've shared earlier, our advocacy work is focused on federally, pan-Canadian, and provincially in Ontario. And we engage with these three key levels of decision makers because each one of their actions and decisions significantly affect the ALS community. So for example, we know that the investments in research that will lead to effective treatments for ALS are important to our community. And the federal government is Canada's biggest funder of health research. So that is why we advocate to the federal government for ALS research funding to better identify treatment targets, to support earlier diagnosis, and strengthen the overall environment in Canada to attract further clinical trials so that people living with ALS will have earlier access to therapies. There are also issues that are cross-jurisdictional, that are pan-Canadian, such as access to therapies. So we advocate for equitable, timely, and affordable access to therapies, and we collaborate on initiatives to inform the drug access pathway, such as through inputs on health technology assessments for therapies. We also work with other provinces to share our learnings, our resources, and tools with the ALS community across Canada. Provincially in Ontario, we lobby the Ontario government for access to clinical care, community support, equipment, home care, as Kim mentioned. And while we lobby specifically in Ontario, we work with other provinces to support them with their advocacy as opportunities arise in their provinces as well. I also want to share with you some of the core elements that guide our advocacy work. And as I've said before, the needs and lived experience of people affected by ALS shape our advocacy approach and the priorities we bring forward. And it's also important for the ALS community to feel empowered and engage as advocates to firsthand share the realities of this devastating disease. So we train and mobilize our community to be able to take action and get in front of decision makers to be able to tell their story. And this is a really key way for us to build relationships with government officials at every level and continue for us to position ourselves as a reliable organization, but also as a community as a whole that governments can turn into for insights and solutions. These are some of our advocacy numbers from last year and how we demonstrate these core elements I just shared with you. We've become trusted partners by participating in consultation opportunities, whether they're through formal processes like pre-budget consultations, and other consultation hosted by Health Canada, for example, in response to issues that arise in the overall ecosystem. We engage with government officials through a variety of ways, and one of those ways is by holding meetings with them. And last year we had 31 meetings to bring forward the issues that are important to the ALS community. And lastly, we have a tool available on our website to empower our community members like you in your advocacy. And this is something that we see significant uptake in. And we're always looking for ways to empower you and continue supporting you in your advocacy. So if there are resources you'd like to see more of, please let us know. Lastly, I want to highlight some of ALS Canada's recent advocacy successes and our next steps and priorities with that. So starting with Ontario, last year, through significant collaboration and efforts, we were able to secure a first of its kind investment by the Ontario government to support multidisciplinary care, support and equipment in the province. This is really a transformational investment and important recognition by the Ontario government for the ALS community. And we really know that this program has a strong potential to set a national benchmark. So our priority now is to demonstrate its impact on Ontario, and we're working to see how we can bring the same level of unified approach to care across Canada. Federally, ALS Canada's ongoing advocacy for the federal government to provide funding for Capture ALS was recognized and included in the Standing Committee on Finance's 2025 budget recommendations. So this means that out of thousands and thousands of submissions and requests, the committee prioritized ours. While this doesn't guarantee an investment from the government at this stage, this is one major step in our advocacy to achieve that goal. And we're going to continue advocating federal government to make sure that this translates into real investment. And one of the key ways we're looking to do that is to continue raising this issue. And that is through the support of the All-Party ALS Caucus. And I'm very pleased to share that we have been successful in reigniting caucus support. And we had our first caucus meeting very recently. The caucus was first established back in 2016, and over the years has played a really strong role in having ALS community represented at the parliament. So we're very proud to share that we were able to bring the parliamentarians back and create support for important dialogue to push our advocacy forward, whether that's research funding or other issues that are of importance to the ALS community. So we look forward to continue working with them to deepen our engagement for investments for a world free of ALS. So that is all I have for you today. I will pass over to my colleague, Jennifer Namayanga.
Thanks, Elida. I'm here to talk a little bit about knowledge exchange. I'm Jennifer Aslin, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing, Strategic Communications, and Knowledge Exchange for ALS Canada. So to touch upon a little bit of the fourth strategic impact goal, empowering informed decision-making and recognition of ALS, we'll talk a little bit about being the trusted go-to source for timely, credible information on ALS, mobilizing knowledge exchange, and of course, advancing awareness and understanding of ALS. Next slide. So in terms of being the trusted go-to source for ALS information, we want to ensure that we're providing timely information to the community. We do this in many ways. It includes being active on social media. So you can find us on all social media channels at ALS Canada. We're on X, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, which we're seeing the most growth in. So be sure to follow us there. In addition, you can stay up to date on what's happening across the organization through our newsletter. So you can sign up for our newsletter by scrolling to the bottom of our website, our homepage, and adding your email address to be able to receive that bi-monthly newsletter that covers information, anything from the events happening across our organization to research and advocacy updates and other mission areas, as well as ensuring that you're getting the most up-to-date news as to what's happening within the ALS landscape at large. We also do several email campaigns throughout the year that touch on different things happening again across the organization and within the landscape. And of course, we know that not everyone is able to access the internet, so we do have printed content. And if you were to need anything printed, you'd be able to contact our organization and we'd be able to get in touch with you to be able to provide those resources. In addition, we have stories and news updates that are constantly happening on our website. As you can see from that image on your screen, stories and news can be accessed at the top of our menu bar on our newly designed website. So we want to always ensure that we're keeping up to date on technology. And so we were happy to redevelop our website last year, launching last September. We have a new look and feel to our website and the ability to have very smooth user experience. We wanted to ensure that our website is, of course, accessible, that we're including credible information, and that we're curating the information that's there. I'll pass it along to Umayanga, who'll talk a little bit more about mobilizing knowledge exchange.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name is Umayanga Yogalingam. I'm the Manager of Knowledge Exchange and Community Information at ALS Canada. So at ALS Canada, we mobilize knowledge and knowledge exchange in different and innovative ways, with really the goal of helping the ALS community and our partners feel empowered to make informed decisions. And I will quickly go through some of our offerings that are seen here in this slide. Next slide, please. So starting off with our flagship knowledge exchange program, the Canadian ALS Learning Institute, otherwise known as the CALI. This is an online small group learning experience that was created in response to a growing interest by individuals impacted by ALS to really better understand the ALS landscape. So this would include things like clinical research, therapy development, regulatory approval and reimbursements, as well as treatment advocacy. So with the CALI, we are really hoping to empower participants with lived experience of ALS to make informed decisions, share their stories to build community, and advocate for issues that are important to them. And that includes equitable, timely, and accessible and affordable access to treatment. So ultimately, we're just hoping to create a network of informed champions across Canada for ALS research and advocacy. So a little bit about the program. So it consists of 8 3-hour modules, and it features presentations from experts from across Canada as well as the world. It also includes interactive panels, moderated breakout discussions, as well as engaging activities. Participants of the CALI also get to connect with other members of the ALS community from across Canada. And since November 2021, when we first launched the program, there have been 82 CALI graduates. And we are now preparing for our 5th year of the program, which will run in January and February 2026. And so the applications for the program will be opening in a few months in October 2025. So stay tuned for more information if you are interested in joining the CALI. Next slide, please. So all of our CALI graduates go on to become ALS Canada community ambassadors. So community ambassadors stay engaged through monthly meetings where they hear the latest updates on research and advocacy from ALS Canada staff as well as guest speakers. Community ambassadors also use the meetings as opportunities to share their own advocacy efforts. So on screen here, you'll see some of our active ambassadors who participated in a variety of initiatives, including sitting on committees, organizing awareness activities such as the flag raising you see there, outreach and meetings with elected officials, as well as writing articles and participating in media interviews about ALS. Next slide, please. So in addition to the CALI as well as the Community Ambassador Program, we offer a range of virtual learning opportunities through our webinar series. So we currently run 3 main webinar series. We have a bi-monthly community services webinar where expert guest speakers cover topics related to care, quality of life, and support for the ALS community. Our next session will be happening in August. We also have 2 research webinars that David had mentioned previously, ALS Research and Clinical Trials 101 Q&A drop-in. So this is a 1-hour monthly webinar where you can ask the ALS Canada research team anything about ALS research, clinical trials, treatment, genetics, and much, much more. And you can get accurate information from a trusted source. And the next one is actually happening next week on Wednesday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you're interested, please feel free to register. And then we also have the ALS Clinical Trials Unbox webinar series, which is a half-hour bi-monthly webinar. And in this webinar, we have speakers present on ongoing clinical trials in Canada. And so this is also an opportunity for participants to ask questions directly to speakers who are often pharmaceutical company representatives, as well as academic investigators. And the next one will be happening in July. In addition to these webinar series, we have sort of one-off webinars and workshops on special topics of interest, such as our recent Will Planning 101 webinar that happened in May, as well as the caregiver mental health workshops that Kim had mentioned earlier. And all of our webinars are recorded and they can be found on the ALS Canada YouTube channel. Next slide, please. So we have many other resources available to the ALS community. We have the Children and Youth Resource Hub, which was launched earlier this year in March. So this hub provides age-appropriate community and expert-informed resources such as videos, worksheets, tip sheets for both children and adults to help children better understand what ALS is, how it progresses, how they can express their feelings, as well as how they can cope with the changes and the impact of the disease on both themselves as well as their family. We also continue to create concise, easy to understand fact sheets that are designed to meet the evolving needs of the community. So these fact sheets provide information on key topics such as ventilation, traveling in ALS, palliative care, and so much more. And lastly, for those who are unable to attend the Canadian ALS Learning Institute or the CALI, we have created something called CALI Lights. And so this is a growing collection of evergreen resources, mostly infographics on topics that we do cover in the CALI. So things like how to read a research paper, how to read a press release, and the Canadian Drug Access Pathway. And so this is just a very quick snapshot of the knowledge exchange and mobilization work happening at ALS Canada. And we remain committed to making knowledge exchange a priority and ensuring that the ALS community, as well as our partners, have access to accurate and easy to understand information that can empower informed decision making. And I will pass it back to Jen.
Thanks, Mayanga. And lastly, we do our best to ensure that the recognition of ALS is known to the greater community. We want to ensure that public awareness is at the forefront of everyone's minds, especially during the time of June, of course, when we have June Awareness Month. But we also do this through engagement on social media, so engaging with folks across all of our channels. We also recently launched, just late last year, a new blog series called In My Words. This is an opportunity to hear from the community directly. So this can be through art, through words, through video. If you're interested in that blog series, please do reach out, communications@als.ca, to share your story. We also are always working on media relations efforts. So more and more you're seeing ALS come up in the news. We try to be that resource for folks to be able to take on media interviews or point people in the right direction of where to find clinicians or researchers to take part in those media relations opportunities, because we want to ensure that the right information is out there. And as mentioned, during ALS Awareness Month, we also have the opportunity to recognize Lou Gehrig Day earlier in the month, as well as Global ALS Awareness Day that's coming up this weekend. In addition, the organization will be putting together a public opinion poll to gauge how folks know or what they understand of ALS and what ALS Canada does. So we'll be looking forward to sharing those results with folks later in the year and into 2026. And now, of course, next slide. None of this work would be doable without the generous donors that we have backing our organization and our community. So I'm going to pass it along to Chris Pond.
Thanks, Jen. Happy ALS Awareness Month to everyone. My name is Chris Pond. I'm the VP of Fund Development, also a community member, and proud to be here with all of you today. So next slide. When we talk about fund development, our primary objective is to raise funds to support the strategic impact goals that Tammy spoke about earlier, those being research, community service, advocacy, and knowledge exchange. And you can hear from my whole team, all the work they're doing, they need financial support, and that's what our team's here to do. Next slide. So how do we do this? So fundraising helps offset and underwrite costs to the organization through things such as sponsorship, major, planned, or matching gifts, digital and mail campaigns, cause marketing, and in-kind support, just to name a few. So by raising these critical funds, ALS Canada can direct more funds to the mission to create even more impact on the ALS landscape across Canada. Next slide. So fundraising is very important. As mentioned previously, it helps support our strategic impact goals. It also allows the ALS community and other communities to rally together to raise awareness and share the work of ALS Canada. It also ensures transparency, so we're very specific in our annual impact and financial reporting and communications to share and demonstrate how we are stewarding our donor dollars. And last but not least, fundraising allows us to advance opportunities that can innovate and change what it means to live with ALS. And a great example was what Dave mentioned earlier with the TD genetic counselor. That was only made possible by funding by a great supporter like TD. Next slide. So our goal is to meet donors where they're at. We have a diverse range of different vehicles for donors to give. So whether they want to give through the mail, online, participate in an event, or numerous other ways, we have the vehicles to meet donors where they're at. So you'll just see on the screen there's some different examples, but we really try to target and have opportunities for donors like you to come in and support the organization where you see fit. So that's it for fundraising. I think that ends the presentation, but now we're going into questions with the group. I know a lot have put it in chat, so I'll pass it back to
me.
Yes,
Thanks.
there we go.
Thanks very much, Chris. I appreciate that. And thank you to the entire team. I hope that this is giving you some insights in how ALS Canada goes about doing our work. And what I'm really proud of is the fact that we're there on the very day that sometimes people are diagnosed and able to help them to start navigating their journey with ALS. Sometimes that's the community leads who, as Kim mentioned, are in the clinics here in Ontario, or doing a similar role to what the provincial societies do in each of their provinces across the country. We're able to help provide those information resources, the way that people can connect with one another so that ALS isn't as isolating and that people know that they've got somebody lockstep with them along the journey. We're helping to make some of those investments into making sure that there's earlier diagnosis, as you heard about with Refer ALS, or being able to help facilitate people's participation in research in things like Capture ALS and Project Mine and other programs. And then stretching that out to look at what we're doing to be able to make sure that people can get timely and equitable access to therapies. Elida again mentioned the work that's gone into even putting input into the submission process for CADTH, or the Canadian Drug Agency, to make sure that the voices and the perspectives of people affected by ALS across the country are being brought forward. In the most recent one, with over 600 people that provided their surveys responses, as well as the one-to-one interviews that were done. That also goes forward with the clinical input into that process that Colleen's able to do with CALS, to be able to draw the information from all of those valuable inputs and resources from across the country. And again, then we look at what we're doing within research to be able to make sure that we've got a good, strong body of research that can be done in the country, but also how does that have an impact and a part to play on a national scale? And even with that, we look at what's being done and consideration. You heard a little bit about the International Alliance of ALS MND Associations, whether we're sharing resources or whether we're helping to provide input. Again, that meeting was co-hosted between ALS Canada and ALS Quebec last year in Montreal. And because of the uncertainty in the US, we've been able to respond and co-host it back in Toronto this year to be able to make sure that people from around the world are able to participate in those meetings. So we're really pleased to be able to talk to you about what's being done. And there have been some questions about the CALI. And what I really appreciate, and where I know that I had just my heart swell, was a couple of meetings after one of the groups of the CALI graduates had come together for their meeting. And I looked at the agenda, and on that agenda, we had a number of different parts that they could play. So one was somebody was presenting on a piece of research that they were doing, and they wanted to make sure that the graduates had an opportunity to help inform how that clinical trial design would go. We also had some Health Canada consultation, and the graduates were able to consider how they would respond to that. And not just from their disease state at which they may have known it at that moment, but instead more broadly, how could they help to represent what was coming forward from the ALS community? And then there was a third component to it, and that was to have a company that was looking for community members that could help to advise them on an advisory board. So again, just a wonderful way that people could really participate and feel very well equipped to be able to participate across many different facets. So those are just some of the things that we have been able to do and that we're so pleased about. The other thing with ALS Canada is that we do have a very sophisticated governance structure. So we have a board, we have the advocacy committee or advocacy council that we had talked about. We also have the Scientific and Medical Advisory Council and the Community Services Advisory Council. And each one of these groups is well supported both by people that are within that area. So Community Services Advisory Council has allied health professionals, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, respirologists, speech language pathologists, but it also has a number of community members who are there. A group that we can really go to say, you know, what's happening out there that we should be aware of when we're thinking about adjusting our programs, or what do we need to be thinking about when we are adjusting our programs, and they give really great quality input. And that happens as well within the Scientific and Medical Advisory Council, where we have researchers and clinicians from across the country who are helping to make sure that we're making the best investments, as well as having community members who are on those committees and councils as well. So that's just a little bit about our organization. We do have a few questions that have come in, and I think some that are coming in as we speak. So the first one, let's see. Suddenly all the screens change. Jen, maybe I'll see, do you have one that you can bring up? Well, I'm just getting things reconfigured here.
Not a problem. We've been answering some questions via the chat as well as in the question box. So again, if you'd like to place your questions there. We did have a question, and this can go either to Chris or Kim, but what can Canadians do beyond donating to support the ALS community, especially during June ALS Awareness Month and throughout the year?
I can start, Kim. I think spreading the word on why ALS in Canada is important to you. So whether you can do it through your social or through your conversations, or even volunteer at the different events that take place throughout the month and throughout the year. I think just being there, supporting us in that way, even if it's not financial, is very important to us.
Thanks, Jen. I was actually going to say the exact same thing as Chris. I think it's about sharing your story. I think the more awareness we can bring to ALS and the work that ALS Canada does, it'll be crucial for people to understand the impact. And I think there's a real lack of understanding of what ALS, the disease is, and how it impacts individuals and their families. So the more people are willing to share that, I think is going to be crucial. It's not always about the financial aspect. Impact is really important by sharing those individual stories so people can understand who those individuals who are not affected by ALS can understand what ALS does to a family. And I think the other thing is if people want to contribute, we also, we have an equipment loan program. We accept donations of gently used equipment up to 5 years old. Happy for people to go onto the ALS Canada website, als.ca, to look at making a donation specifically if they have something that they've used and they no longer need. So that's another option that individuals have.
Thanks very much, Kim and Chris, for answering that. We also had a question coming in, and it was about the percentage of funding that is going to research specifically. But I do want to let people know that, again, on our website at als.ca, in the About Us section, we do have all of our financial reports that are there and available, our annual reports that help to give that sort of breakdown. And next week, we will actually be publishing the annual report for 2024 so that you'll be able to see what not only the funds we're doing, but the impact of that work. And when we look at research specifically, it's about 26% that we're able to dedicate to research. But what that doesn't represent is the additional funds that we are able to leverage with Brain Canada. They don't come in through our financial statements, but we do a significant portion of being able to make sure that that funding is able to be directed to research, which brings it up to about $3.7 million annually. And Dave, maybe you can just, again, I know you mentioned it in your talk, but just talk about how it's beyond the funds that are put in. It's also about the leverage that happens.
Sure. Thanks, Tammy. I mean, we have worked really hard over the years to, as we said, to be connected around the world. And this has afforded us, as we've tried to become knowledge leaders in ALS, the opportunity to be involved in advisory boards, peer review panels, and other pieces for other organizations around the world, as well as large ALS research initiatives around the world that are giving many millions of dollars. And so it's important to us that not only are we making sure that every donor dollar that comes in that goes back out to research is done in the most rigorous, fair, and impactful manner, but also we want to make sure we're helping other organizations to do that effectively. And so we really feel like it's important for us to be a part of that conversation, and that it helps to get your donor dollars to go further.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do want to just note that we're getting a lot of questions in. So if it's a question that we're unable to answer during our time that we have in the next 15 minutes, then we'll be happy to consider how we can get that information back out to you following the webinar. Dave, we have another question for you, and I think it's really about where are you most excited about research going at this point and as you see in the coming future?
So I don't know if Colleen also would have her own answer for this. I would say if I were to take this to three main things that I'm probably most excited about. Number one, we finally know the disease is treatable. This is a big one. I've said it at the Learning Institute many times the last couple of years, but it's a big deal. We know ALS is treatable. Tofersen, Qalsody, which is for people who have a SOD1 variant, so 2% of the disease. are thriving on this particular therapy, most people who take it. So that means if we hit the right target at the right time in the right people, we can treat and stop this disease. We're also now doing things that are going to help us to treat the disease earlier. And that's a whole thing we can't get into today. But the hope is that someday with all of that, we'll be able to treat people better. The second one is that there are things coming into the clinical trial landscape from the lab that we're quite excited about. We're very interested in them. A few targets that we really come from strong basic research, and I think those will be very exciting in the next couple of years. And then the way that we're doing trial design, we're really trying to advance things to try to get home run type treatments with some de-risking sort of early platforms to say, if we're going to run a big phase 3 clinical trial, we want to be really sure that this might be something effective. And again, that's very cryptic, but if you want to come to our 101, we're happy to talk about them in more detail. I would urge you to look up something called Experts ALS, really interesting as a trial design, and I'll pass to Colleen.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add, the ALS research landscape has really changed dramatically even during my time here at ALS Canada. We now have multiple disease-modifying therapies approved in Canada. We have deeper insights into the genetic and molecular underpinnings of ALS, and we have a much more connected community globally. And I know I mentioned some of those strategic initiatives that we're involved in, but there are many, many others like AMP ALS, Access ALS. So I think we're really building on a lot of momentum right now. And like Dave mentioned, the progress that we've seen with the approval of Qalsody for SOD1 ALS really reinforces the idea that if we can target the right biological pathway at the right time, we can alter the disease course. And so I'm really hopeful that we can have similar results for all forms of ALS in the future.
Thanks very much, Colleen and Dave. Appreciate you answering that. One of the other questions we actually got in has said, you know, the organization has accomplished a lot, but what are the hurdles that we're confronting? And I think we can probably reflect on this past week in terms of one of those things, and it was something that we've learned from advocacy, where we were able to be successful with the Ontario government. And it really was because we worked so tightly between the clinics, ALS Canada, and the ALS community. And so last week, we were very pleased to be able to bring together researchers, clinicians, people from within the ALS organizations across the country and the community to be able to talk about what a national ALS strategy is and could be. And so Dave, maybe, or Colleen, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we found alignment, and then Elida, perhaps you could talk about what makes an advocacy effort to be successful in terms of the alignment there.
Did you want to? Okay, so was this about the summit? I was answering a question in the Q&A.
Sorry, go for it, Dave.
When we brought everyone together, what I can say is that, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you have such a disparate group of people from different backgrounds that come together to talk about what are the priorities if we were to come together for a national strategic plan on research. Really have a unified voice going to government, going to donors, going to, you know, a collaborative environment across the organizations in the country. And it was pretty remarkable in the end that they really were focused on, let's make sure we have research opportunities for people diagnosed with ALS across this country. Let's have really good opportunities for Canadians to be able to tell or contribute to research in a way that affects the global effort. And then let's make sure we're ready across the country so that when great clinical trials or experimental therapeutics are available, they come to Canadian clinics. And then we actually get access to Canadians as fast as possible for those particular treatments that do prove to be effective. So it was pretty amazing. Even the fundamental researchers who are stuck in the lab, who don't actually meet people with ALS that often, were really believing that this is how we should sort of move forward as a collective while we continue to drive great fundamental research in the lab through other means. That was my takeaway anyway. It's so recent, we haven't had time to really fully get everyone's, but I'm sure Colleen also has some interesting perspectives.
No, I just wanted to add that it was just so nice to see the engagement from everyone in the room. And it wasn't just one day. We also had pre-meeting interviews with attendees. We collected information via surveys. Obviously, we had the very robust discussions the day of the summit. So there's so much data that we'll now be working through as we look to that unified voice and ask. And maybe I'll turn over to Elida to talk about the next step in the process.
Sure. Yeah, and I completely agree with my colleagues in terms of having that collaboration. It's really important. And the takeaway from here is that we're going to come together and then bring forward a government ask. And again, this is where that collaboration is key because, you know, governments here wide range of voices every day from their constituents, from other advocacy groups, from industry leaders, community groups. So that constant flow of information and perspective makes it even more important for advocacy efforts to be able to be aligned and collaborative. So having a unified message after this summit for our advocacy, I know will stand out. It will build that credibility and trust, and also increases our chances of being heard and for governments to act upon.
And so thank you for that. And I think just in terms of a hurdle has been in the past, perhaps, that we didn't have alignment amongst the community. And so what I'm hearing is that now that all of the facets of the stakeholder groups have come together and said, this is an area that we want to see focus, this gives us an opportunity to have that alignment and one voice, one ask to be able to hopefully move this forward. So I think as we have talked even to the caucus recently, that opportunity to look at what can be done at a federal level and being able to differentiate what can be done at a provincial level and what can be done at a local level to be able to make that information come forward. Thank you. Going along with the advocacy piece of it too, we're getting asked about what are we doing in collaboration with provincial governments to ensure consistent care and support across the country. And so, Kim and Elida, I'm again going to ask you to speak to this, understanding that there are societies in each of the provinces across the country that do help to provide some of those supports within their province, and also then what are they doing and how are we working together? And so maybe we can talk a little bit about the National Advocacy Committee, that working group that you mentioned, Kim, and even some of the help that we're giving to some of the societies in the learnings that we've taken from Ontario. So maybe, Kim, do you want to start us off and then hand it over to Elida?
I'll start and I'll push over to Elida. So I think there's always challenges in working with different provinces and different government organizations. So a lot of healthcare comes through those provincial governments, which means that we don't have a lot of insight to what happens. What we want to see is that people have access to the care when they need the care. They have people who are specialized or have a lot of knowledge base around providing that individual care. So those are the conversations we're actually having with each of the societies currently to identify where those gaps are. Right now, as a collective with the provincial societies, the conversation is around access to long-term care and ensuring that people have access to respiratory support in long-term care. But in terms of home care specifically, it's such an individual thing. We don't even have consistency within Ontario. But we are having those conversations with a possible new palliative pathway for care, which means that people with ALS will have consistency wherever they live. We do have some really great models in Ontario specifically that have worked really well in certain areas of the province, ensuring that you have a consistent person who understands the disease progression and can put in those providers when needed. But I think really it's about those provinces coming together to have those conversations so that we can collectively advocate, because individually it doesn't always work. We have those individual conversations about someone in some province living with ALS and be able to advocate. But what we'd like to see is be able to have a collective so that all people have the same access to the services.
Yeah, I agree with Kim. And one of the ways for us to be able to facilitate conversation is through the National Advocacy Committee, as Tammy mentioned. And that committee consists of different provincial societies, and it really plays a central role in being able to align our advocacy efforts across the country, to be able to coordinate strategies, share what's going on in each provinces, and also for us to be able to develop resources as issues come up and to be able to facilitate that learning. And one of the other things I'll add is, for example, a project that we're currently working on is taking on a burden of ALS study across Canada. And this study, we haven't done an updated one since 2014, and this will be a lot more comprehensive than the previous one. And this study will be able to guide not only ALS Canada's advocacy work, but it can be a very strong tool for other provinces to use to have that economical breakdown of what ALS costs in each province. And that can lead to some significant pushes in different provinces when it comes to support for care, community support, and equipment as well. And I know Kim and Community Services Team and Advocates are also working on different needs assessments to better understand what each province is working on, so that we can have these tools and resources available the information available so that we can push forward our advocacy within different provinces.
Thanks, Elida. And one of the follow-ups from that is one of the comments that came in about how is the patient community engaged in these conversations. And I can tell you, just as I mentioned within the governance structure at ALS Canada, we have people living with ALS in every aspect of our governance structure, but they're also included in all aspects of our advocacy. So whether it's on our National Advocacy Committee or the Advocacy Committee for ALS Canada specifically, again, we have people with lived experience. People who have come through the Kelly program have been incredible advocates. And we learned this very, very early on. Dave and I were doing some advocacy and was kind of off the corner of the side of our desk. We were working with an advocate at that time, Brian Parsons, who'd actually come from being a staffer on Parliament Hill. We were in a very deep bureaucratic meeting. It was about the compassionate care benefit. And by all, professional suggestions, this meeting was over. It was done. And you could tell that people across the table were done. Dave and I went to stand up, and Brian Parsons kind of looked up at both of us as he remained sitting, and he nodded and we sat down. And Brian delivered a message that as an organization, even though I have been personally impacted by ALS and we've been around people with ALS for a very long time, Brian could deliver a message that we couldn't. And he had people in tears. That really brought home not just the detail and the technical aspects of what we were doing, but the reality of people that are living actively with ALS. And he did it over and over again. I remember again being at a press conference, and it was a year later, and he said, I was here a year before and stood before you asking for change. I'm here a year later, and I'm asking for change. I may not be here next year to be able to ask for change. Those are messages that we can't deliver. And so we know the power of the community voice in all of our efforts, and we make sure that our community is there and the urgency is felt and heard and the realities are seen. And I think that's the strength of our community being able to come forward. So that gives you a little bit of an update about what has been going on. A couple of other things. I think we just haven't heard from Umayanga. So Umayanga, I would love to get some feedback from you in thinking about what is the most exciting thing that you're looking forward to in this coming year.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. So I think what I'm most excited for is to continue developing new resources. So we want to expand the Children and Youth Resource Hub. Youth is a bit of a tricky audience, so I'm really hoping that we can co-create some resources, get a group of youth who have been impacted by ALS together and get them to help inform what resources we need. We're also going into another year of the CALI, so this is the 5th year, and I think every year the CALI just gets better and better as we try really hard to implement the feedback that we've heard from participants every year. And we also have a CALI curriculum committee who have been instrumental in making sure that this program really caters to the needs of the ALS community. So lots of things to look forward to.
Thanks very much, Umayanga. Does anybody else? Oh, Jen, you've come off mute.
No, I was going to say, as we wrap things up, Tammy, I think it would be a great way to kind of wrap things up as we're almost at time. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us and the community during this June ALS Awareness Month, and I know you've shared a few small stories there, but something that's inspired you this past year, or what motivates you to keep on going as CEO of ALS Canada?
Thanks, Jen. So I've been the CEO now for 11 years, and I came into the community when my cousin was diagnosed in 2008. And I can't help but reflect on the number of changes that I've seen since that time. When Doug was diagnosed, there was one therapy, and now we have multiple therapies, and one that's showing a great deal of promise. What I also see that's different in where we're going to is the work that we're doing at ALS Canada and the opportunity that we have to really change things. The collaboration that we're seeing, this national summit, was just an incredible opportunity to bring together, again, researchers, clinicians, people living with ALS, people who have been affected by ALS, and the other ALS organizations to really try and find a point of contact and to think about how can we accelerate what we're doing? How can we get that formalized ask to be able to go forward to the government? When I think about the work that we're doing internationally and how we're helping to now really influence what's happening around the world, I'm excited by that. When I look at the investments that we've been able to make in the because of the provincial program into the resources that we have here at ALS Canada, and how we can now look at that and how can that what we've learned from being able to get the Ontario government to provide this critical funding, not just to ALS Canada, but to the clinics to make sure they're properly resourced. How can this be leveraged across the country? So again, I think that this is that time for really leapfrogging ahead of where we are currently. And I'm very excited about where we're going and what will be available to our community. Again, even things like the National Genetics Counselor. This is a community of people that we now can say they don't have ALS. They may have the genetic mutation for it, but they don't yet have ALS. And so what are the support mechanisms that they require and the information resources? So there's just so much more than what we've talked about in the past that we have to go. So I see that we are at time, and I appreciate all of the questions. You know, some of these questions can be answered in some of our webinars as well. So again, you've heard about a few of them. Our website has some great resources on it as well. And reach out to the team. We are here to be able to answer questions, and we will try to get back to the ones that have been asked as we've been here. So as we head into the latter half of June ALS Awareness Month, there are 8 walks here in Ontario this weekend, and there are many more that are happening right across the country. So again, we invite you to be able to be engaged. June 21st, take a look. I know that the International Alliance of ALS MND Associations will have a lot going on that particular day. And thank you for being here today and for your active participation. We've really appreciated your engagement and look forward to seeing you soon.